I knew the consequences so well. I said them as we were going to the robbery. I remember this. It's so crazy that you asked that.
I want to go back a little bit with you. You got a really interesting story, and you are somebody who spent time in prison
Yeah.
and went through the system. And I'm just curious a little bit. I've known a lot of people that are in similar, have been in similar situations, and there's a big spectrum of experience when you go to jail or to prison. But I just want to ask you a little bit about what drew you to that life? What put you in that situation in the first place? How did it change you? And and yeah, overall, what was the experience for you of going through our correctional system?
Yeah. So I was getting in trouble when I was a little kid, like a lot, I come from a good family. My both my parents had jobs growing up. We lived in decent like areas. I lived outside of Cleveland, Ohio. Then we moved to Chicago. We didn't live in like a fucked up area, but I would always be hanging out in the bad areas, and I would always get into trouble. So I was in and out of like different places growing up, and juvie, and like a group home or two that I was sent to, and like different things that were happening to me. And then I just was always attracted to. I kind of was. I always felt like an outcast, right? So I was always attracted to that. Um, and then when I got a little older, and I mean like late teens, I started like hanging out with the wrong people, and even though I had really good friends in my life that I cared about until their death, the people I'm speaking about. But when I was 18, I got arrested for armed robbery. It was over drugs, and and I was involved in a gang at that time, and so I went to prison. I got sentenced to 10 years for the armed robbery. It was an armed robbery, home invasion. We were going there to rob some drug dealers for what we thought was going to be like 20,000, 30,000 pills of ecstasy, maybe more. The guy's like, oh, he's got 2 kilos of ecstasy, and this is when ecstasy was really popular in. I mean, this was January 2002. So the whole thing went bad. There was 5 of us. The whole armed robbery went bad. A girl jumped out of the window. Um, we didn't get shit. It was a dummy mission. What I would call a dummy mission uh back then. And we were trying to get away. We ended up getting caught by the police, and I got sentenced to 10 years in prison. And so I went to prison, and I had this mindset back then. I don't know. I always wanted to, I think some of it was I always wanted to prove myself. I always felt like maybe I had something to prove looking at it now, you know?
Before the robbery, I mean, because that's a pretty big escalation. I don't know exactly what you were doing, but were you thinking about consequences at that time, or were you just like,
No, I'll tell you something. I thought about the consequences. What's crazy is I knew the consequences.
yeah,
I knew the consequences so well. I said them as we were going to the robbery. I remember this. It's so crazy that you asked that because, well, nobody's ever asked me that specific question, but I remember, I'd been in county jail a couple times. So I knew like what charges were what. And I knew that, like, for example, an armed robbery was a class X felony in Illinois, and it carried 6 to 30 years, right? So I remember being in the car because we had a shotgun and we had a baseball bat. I had a bat. One of my rappies had the shotgun, and I remember saying like, this is 6 to 30, so we gotta be in and out. We can't get caught. But I said it. I knew what I was getting into. There was no illusions. It wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. I knew exactly what the fuck I was doing.
do you think that you were in a place like to even escalate it more if it had to get escalated in that moment for, if somebody pulls out a gun on you now you're looking at, maybe I have to shoot this person, you know, you're just in a bad place, right? Just in a crazy situation.
I only got worse as I got older. That incident was the first big escalation, I guess. But I got caught with a gun when I was 14 or 15 and went to juvie for it. in that situation, to answer your question, I know exactly what you're asking. Like, I was cracking people with that baseball bat, right? Like, had I, just because I was such an idiot back then, I would have escalated if I felt at that time like I needed to. Thank God I didn't. What's crazy is that my rappy that had the shotgun, he fired it upstairs, and there was a kid sleeping in the next room, which I didn't know about. Nobody did, and that shotgun blast missed that kid. Thank God. But had that happened, I don't know exactly what the details were with this guy shooting that shotgun. What he said is the person that he had at gunpoint tried to grab the shotgun. He shot it off, and it went up to the ceiling, and there was a kid in the room. But it doesn't matter. Had that happened, I wouldn't be here now. I'd be still in prison doing life.
When the judge handed down that sentence to you, what was the mindset? Like, you're going in, what what are you thinking at that moment?
Well, I took a plea. Let me tell you what happened. Just because, uh, I mean, I'm not like a whole like doing all the jail podcasts that there are nowadays. I have done a couple, but like there was five of us. Out of the five of us, I was the only person that did not agree to cooperate with people, with the state's attorney, essentially, with the police, because my mind back then was like, that's not me. I'm not gonna ever be that guy, right? And so it was like principle that I'm not gonna rat on anybody. I'm not gonna say nothing. So I refused to even sign a waiver to speak to the police. Um, and that had consequences. So they were not trying to give me a small a lenient sentence whatsoever, even though I didn't even have a gun. Um, Everybody else, three of my rappy, two of the a rappy is somebody that's on the case with you. Two guys didn't even do jail, didn't even do prison time, and then the other two guys that did do prison time did less than me. And I copped out to that 10 years because I didn't want to go to trial, because I knew if I went to trial, all of those guys were going to testify on me, and I would have gotten 30 years or more, because there was 10 or 12 counts at the time: home invasion, armed robbery, armed violence, residential burglary, battery. They just threw the book at us. um and I would have gotten found guilty with zero doubt. I would have got found guilty. And so I took that plea agreement. What was going through my mind is, well, fuck it, here we go.
And so when you get there, again, first night, doing that time, like what do you, I guess I'm trying to get at, like, what, because you're a different person now, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to get to the, like, where did that sort of transition take place for you? And when you first get locked up, are you like, I'm gonna have to do what I have to do in here, or is it like I have to change my life?
I was scared. Because it's your first time in adult prison. I was like, I was obviously scared. You hear crazy stories, but I was also a member of a gang, and so it's not as bad, because that it's called being plugged in Chicago. You're plugged. Like, that's what they say. Are you plugged? Like, if somebody asks you, like, yo, you plugged? In Chicago, what they're asking you is like, are you in a gang? They'll be like, what's up, bro? You plugged? Right, right. I mean, they just say plugged if you're plugged, but yeah, you're part of a gang. And so I was scared for sure, because I was fucking 18 years old. I turned 19 like the day or two after I got down to prison, but I just adapted, man. You just adapt, and it really is kind of like a fight or flight thing. Some people don't have that in them. I did. It didn't. I guess it served me well in some sense. It didn't serve me well in a lot of sense. Like, I got into a lot of trouble when I was in prison. So, for example, if you combine the county jail time and prison time, I spent over 5 years in solitary confinement, and that's disciplinary segregation. And so that was for getting in trouble. So I spent at one time 2 years, 8 months, and like 15 days in the hole in solitary confinement because I was always getting in trouble. And I get into more trouble in solitary, which is easy to do because they let everybody go to yard once a week. So even though you're in solitary confinement, they'll throw like 15, 20 guys that are in solitary confinement on the same yard and throw a basketball at them and let them fucking play basketball for 5 hours and then leave. Well, guess what? If you're in an argument with a guy on Tuesday, on Friday or Saturday, if they call yard, now you guys are fighting. And now I got another month on top of that. Or if they cock the shotgun, that could be a dangerous disturbance, or if they shoot it, God forbid. But I just snowballed. So that's kind of what my prison experience was like, getting into trouble and more trouble.
What was solitary like? I mean, just maybe break that down a little bit of just being in a room by yourself and stuck with your own thoughts. I mean, how were you dealing with that?
So it's different in different institutions in Illinois. The prisons are so overcrowded that they actually put 2 people to a cell in solitary confinement. So, in like I originally started my prison term at Shawnee Correctional Center, and in 2002, and I got into some trouble down there. I got like a gang activity and some trouble. They sent me down. They sent me to solitary confinement for 6 months. I had a cellmate. But then I got into an argument with somebody on the yard, and then we went on the yard, and I got into a fight, got another month. Then I got into another argument, and the next week got another month added on. So I ended up with like over a year in solitary confinement in like the span of a couple weeks back in SAG, a couple months back in SAG. Then they shipped me off to the maximum security prison because if you have over a certain amount of solitary confinement time, disciplinary segregation time, they put you in max. So then I get down to max, it's the same shit. There's a couple prisons that do single man cells for solitary confinement, and I spent time in some of them, but it's the same shit. I mean, it's the same shit. You're miserable. You don't have a TV most of the time. There are some guys that end up with so much solitary confinement time, so much disciplinary segregation time, that after a certain amount of time they're allowed to have a TV. But I read a lot of books. I did a lot of calisthenics. I talked a lot to people next door to me. I ignored a lot of people. I mean, that was it. I went through some crazy shit there. I mean, I had a guy try to throw some shit on me. Had a guy try to throw some piss on me. I mean, this is the shit that happens there.
And when did you start to kind of shift your mindset into, trying to change yourself and start to think about, becoming better and a little bit more of just getting out of that lifestyle? Were you still in prison? Obviously you were when you started to sort of shift yourself, but
No, I wasn't.
oh, you weren't.
No, fuck no, fuck
So you
no.
did that whole stretch and you were just in that same sort of mindset.
I would be lying if I told you that I had changed my. No, what happened was I technically did 2 bids. I did 5 years, 7 months. I did 5 years, 7 months and some days. And at that time, I did that's off that 10-year sentence. I did 5 years, 7 months and like 16 or 17 days, something like that. And I paroled. Now at that time, I really was like, initially, I'm like, I'm gonna become a personal trainer because I was fucking yoked, and I'm like, I'm gonna become a personal trainer. I read every muscle and fitness magazine cover to cover over the last 5 years. I look great, and so I went out with the desire to do good. I did, and I'm not gonna hang around with gang members. I'm gonna try to do good. I had some money because I had gotten beaten in prison by prison guards. And so I got $25,000, a $25,000 settlement from Illinois Department of Corrections. After the lawyer got his cut, I got $15,000. So I had an apartment. I got a car off Craigslist. And so initially I'm like,
the cops worked you over in jail?
Several times, but I got beat up really bad, where they knocked my tooth out, black eyes, they ears were swollen, they pepper sprayed me with the OC spray point blank in the face. They stomped my nuts. They kicked me. They stomped me. They smashed my face into the ground. They knocked me unconscious. Yeah. Uh, and that's
What was
another
all that
story.
about?
But
Yeah, yeah.
I punched
Sorry, I didn't
I
mean to
punched a
sidetrack you.
lieutenant. That's fine. It's not sidetracking. I punched a lieutenant, a white shirt who's a lieutenant, in the face because he shoved me against the wall because they wanted to take my high necklace from me and I wouldn't give it to him. That's the very short version of the story. But I had this money and I got out and I wanted to do good initially. And when I filled out that job application at Export Fitness in fucking Arlington Heights, they when they saw I had taken this class at Dixon Correctional Center, Education to Careers, and they told you, like, be honest, tell them will explain, in the interview on the fucking, so have you been convicted of a felony? I said yes, and you know will explain in interview, and I was with the fucking manager, so the manager's like looking at my application. I see his face shifting, like I see him like, okay, all right, okay, yeah, all right. You're a felon? And I'm like, yeah. He goes, oh, what were you in locked up for? I said armed robbery. And he goes, oh, listen, buddy. He says, I don't think that I don't think we can do. We're a corporate, this is a corporation, and we work around cash here. And he points to the cash register. I says, buddy, all due respect, I was robbing some people for 2 kilos of ecstasy. I wasn't, I'm not going to take your petty cash. You know what I mean? But I didn't get the job, and whatever. It doesn't matter, because what happened was, after that happened, that I used that as an excuse to be a degenerate scumbag. So I maybe took one more job after that at a grocery store, cutting the meat in the deli. I did that for a little while at Valley Produce. But then after that, I'm like, man, fuck this shit. I used some of that money I got to get an eighth of kilo of cocaine. I started selling cocaine, and then my life just became a miserable, horrible, misery merry-go-round, basically.
And so you got knocked on parole and then went back in?
Yeah, not for that. I got caught with 2 guns on parole while on my way to do another armed robbery, while high on heroin and cocaine. So I did a speedball early in the morning, and I was with my friend, and this guy called me and was trying to get me to do this robbery with him. And when I was sober, I absolutely shut it down because I didn't trust that guy, and I thought that he wasn't trustworthy, which I was correct. But he called me right after I had just gotten, well, and I was super high and a little nuts, and he called me up and said, hey, listen, come meet me on Addison and Kimball and bring that gun, and you just stand out on the lookout. Give me the gun, I'll do the robbery. You stand on the lookout. And so I brought 2 guns, and I went to go meet him. And instead of him picking me up at the bus stop, there were 3 unmarked cars that picked me up and at gunpoint. And I found out afterwards that he had gotten caught with some drugs, and he had used that, he had used me with a gun to get out of that jam that he was in. So the cops call that rolling the ball. They rolled the ball on him, that's what they did.
Going back to the employer, this seems to be something that I think about from time to time, but recidivism rates are so high when people come out there, it's almost like they're going to go back in. Right. And I think just one component of that, having, that being the case, has to be the stigma that's placed upon people when they come out of the system. It's like that employer obviously says, we can't employ you, and well, where else are you going to go now? You have to go back to maybe doing crime, because there's this stigma attached. And I just think that as a society, if we're going to make people pay for their crimes, we have to say that crime was paid for when they come out. and let that be the debt that they've paid, and not just continue to hold that against people for the rest of their lives. I mean, it seems like they're just destined to go back that way.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I'll tell you something. It's better now than it was. It's better now than it
Is it?
was. Yeah, I think so. There's been a lot of look. I got out 14 years ago, man. You're not even allowed to ask if you're a felon anymore on a job application. Now, sure, you could do background checks on people, but things have changed. There's initiatives now to help guys. I'm doing. I'll give you a little insight on something that I'm doing right now, which I'm incredibly excited about. We could talk a little more about it, but
Yeah, please.
so last year I went back to Stateville Correctional Center, which is where I got beat up by those correctional officers, which is where I, had so many miserable things happen to me in my life at that institution. It's a maximum security institution. I went back there and I taught a writing workshop with my writing partner, Adam. And we got permission through Northwestern to do that. So Northwestern got us approved through the governor to go back into Stateville, or for me specifically, to go back into Stateville as a free, tax-paying citizen and teach a writing workshop for 3.5 hours. And we taught 42 guys, one of which was my former cellmate, 6 of which knew me from when I was in prison. And we taught these guys how to come up with log lines, we showed them the 3-act structure of a feature movie. We broke down the 6 plot points in a feature movie, and we worked with all these guys to give them all 6 plot points in their individual stories. Now, the reason I tell you that is because when I left, that is without a doubt the most rewarding thing I think I've done in my life thus far. I can think of nothing else. When I was looking at those guys and telling them that you could fucking do this, because I've done it. I came back here to tell you guys that you could do this shit. And to hug my old cellie, who's still been in prison since 99, and just be like, I got you, and tell him, this shit is possible. But the cool thing is that when I was there, look, there's really intelligent guys that are in prison for sure, that have just some of them have been dealt, and women, but some of them have been dealt a really fucked up hand. There's some people that need to be in prison because they fucking deserve to be in prison. There's some people that just they're not going to get it, and there's some people that made a mistake, and are rehabilitating to get back out. All that to say, and there's some innocent guys, but all that to say, I recognized immediately, and so did my partner Adam, like, out of those 42 guys, all of these guys couldn't be writers, right? None of them, all of them couldn't just get out and become writers. But I'd say about 12, 13 of these guys that we taught, I'm thinking to myself, oh man, you're talented. Like, if you pursued this, you could be a television writer. You could be a film writer. You could do this. Right? I recognized it. And so right now what I'm trying to do is, I'm a member of the Writers Guild of America. And so I'm working with the Writers Guild of America and Northwestern to try to establish a fellowship for a select group of individuals at Northwestern Prison Education Program in Stateville, and try and have the assistance of the Writers Guild, showrunners, executive producers, agents, to give support to these guys. So upon release, they'll have already a really good working knowledge of what a writer's room looks like. For support staff, these guys will have completed a pilot. They'll have completed a outline. Some of them will have completed a feature. And so the idea is, I'm trying to set this up right now with the Writers Guild and with Northwestern to really make this thing happen, so that when these guys get out, they truly have a foot in the door. And it's not like, oh, I just want to get a bunch of felons in Hollywood. That's not the point. The point is, what do we talk about? Well, I can tell you this. We talk about in Hollywood every fucking day: authenticity, lived experience. I got that. But there's a lot of people. I got that, but there's a lot of people that don't necessarily have that lived experience. They don't have that authenticity, and you need that, right? So, okay, here it is on a silver platter. You've got guys that have changed their life. They have been rehabilitated. They have educated themselves, and now they have an education from a top 10 university, and they have experience in Hollywood because we have, this program, and so they could get out and pitch their idea to executives or agents and showrunners, etc., and hopefully get into this business if they want to get into this business. Anyways, that's just like a passion project I'm doing right now.
One of the reasons I was so attracted to your story is because I relate to your story in a lot of ways, just coming from a good family and just being attracted to, I don't know, the streets, being attracted to things that are a little bit risky, and just there's such a fine line of I know so many people that could have gone to jail or could have gone
Yeah,
to
yeah,
prison.
yeah.
They just haven't. I mean, people that are Navy SEALs could have easily been a convict. It doesn't. For me, one of the things I remember about my childhood that I didn't have. Luckily, I never went to prison, but I never really had, even though people had my best interest in mind, and a lot of people were telling me things, I never really had a mentor that I respected or listened to. Did you have anybody when you were young that you thought was cool and like was trying to steer you in the right direction that had your ear, or was it just like that wasn't around for you either?
Man, that's a great question. I've never really thought about that. I don't think I had any mentors. I mean, I look up to my father now, but we didn't have a good relationship growing up. When I was younger, I guess I had a good relationship with my dad. Like he took me fishing and stuff when I was a kid. But then as I got a little older, we didn't hang out at all, and I didn't. My mom, I don't know. I can't say that they were my mentors. I didn't look up to them. I looked up to, I don't know, I looked up to friends, I guess. I didn't really have any. No, I don't think I did have any mentors. Because even in sports, I wrestled when I was like in middle school, right? But then I never continued to try to do that. Like for a brief moment, I guess the wrestling coach was like a mentor for a brief moment in time, but I didn't continue with it. And martial arts when I was a kid and stuff. Like I didn't continue with it. I didn't really. So no, I didn't. I don't think I had any mentors that I really can say like I looked up to this person. I wanted to be like that person. That didn't happen until I was an adult, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, obviously we want to rehabilitate people, but as far as getting ahead of the problem, how I try to mentor people now just because I didn't have one. And I always try to connect with kids in a cooler way than what the alternative is. And I'm just wondering how you think we can actually connect with young people to draw them away from, I mean, it's a very attractive lifestyle. People are attracted to street life, it's a very attractive thing, and getting in trouble. So how can we do a better job as the elders now of steering these kids in a different direction in a way that's more attractive?
I think programs. I think sports. I think sports. Uh, Listening to them, programs for them. You know, that are funded, wrestling programs, jujitsu programs, boxing gyms, you know, uh, art, art. Because some of these kids that grow up or that turn into gangbangers and fucking murderers could just all as well be incredible artists of some sort, right? Or musicians or actors, uh, or like you said, Navy SEALs. So I just think like it's like a weird question, like what objectively what's the actionable item that you could do. I think programs, like what else can you do? You could set up programs. You could start things to try to hey, I'm going to start a program that's offering, look, I'm doing a program. I mean, you know about it. It's probably, you know about the Bear Jew Boxing Club, right? It's a different thing. It's not for the youth. It's for Jews. It's for Jews, right? So the Bear Jew Boxing Club is a gym that I started with the mindset of what's the actionable item that I can bring to the table. You know, I'm not rich. I'm not in the military. Um, I don't have a lot of power, you know, or influence. What can I do right now when I'm seeing Jewish people, young, old, attacked on the street in you know, protests and riots and stuff, and I'm seeing this stuff, and I'm feeling it in my soul because I hate it, and what can I do? And so I said, I'm going to offer training. The one thing that I can do as a former professional boxer, you know, I was never a world class fighter by any means, but I was a decent club level fighter, and I know how to teach boxing. And so, okay, I'm gonna find a space that will allow me to use their gym, and I'm going to hang my little shingle, you know, and rent out the gym and offer any Jewish child, man, woman, whoever that wants to defend themselves in LA, come on, and I'll teach you. If you come and you train hard, I'll teach you. It's not gonna be a fucking title boxing club. No disrespect to title boxing club or any of that shit, but it's not gonna be like a cardio boxing class. I'm not gonna tell you to hit it hard. I'm not gonna, you know, this isn't fucking Equinox. But if you want to learn how to fight, I will show you how to fight. I will teach you how to fight. It might not be fun, it might be monotonous and boring, but if you want to learn how to defend yourself and not be a victim, I will teach you what I know about that with you know, specifically in regards to boxing. I will show you that. And so that's what I'm doing. So just to circle back to what you said, starting a program or doing something to try to help the kids. Because other than that, what else is there? It's just conjecture. It's just talking.
You hit on one of the fundamental. People have to know how to defend themselves. If you're maneuvering through the world and you do not know how to defend yourself, and I don't care who you are, it's a much more you're in a much more stressed state all the time. You know,
Yeah.
it's like being dropped in the middle of the jungle and not knowing how to hunt or build a shelter or make a fire. It's like if you're walking through downtown Los Angeles and you don't know how to fight, you're stressed, right? So you have to know how to handle yourself. And I think people, if people are looking for fundamental foundational things to make their lives better, one of them has to be learning how to defend yourself. It's a primal skill that everyone should know.
And you know, and I agree. And you know what else? Like, everybody isn't going to be able to, like, look, I'm teaching a lot of Orthodox women, you know, that come in from time to train. And look, these women aren't gonna all of a sudden, you know, graduate. There's no graduation, but just like one day get a certificate from me, and next thing you know, they're gonna be able to go out there and be, you know, Clarissa Shields or whatever. You know, like, it's not gonna happen, you know. But it changes your mindset too.
Situational awareness, I think it's so important. And again, you started this after October 7th, which obviously, I mean, we didn't talk about it, but you're Jewish, I'm Jewish. October 7th was a huge thing, and you were looking for ways to get involved, as were a lot of people that I know. So you started this boxing club in Los Angeles, and let's go back a little bit to how you even started fighting in the first place. When did you start? When did you start boxing? When did you get into fighting?
In my 20s, out of prison, in my 20s. So this is what happened. I was a bouncer because I was big. You know, out of prison, I was big, and I was a bouncer. And I was always getting into situations. Not that I started, but like I worked at a club that was rough as fuck, and there was always fights every single night, always drunk people every night. It was open till 4 a.m. That's just what it was, right? And MMA came first, so my boss, who was a bartender, he was like, man, he's like, Sammy, you should do MMA. You should be an MMA fighter. Blah blah blah. I says, all right. And so he introduced me to this coach, who introduced me to this gym called Midwest Training Center in Schaumburg, right? Because I lived with a woman at the time in Schaumburg. I lived with my girlfriend there, and so I started going to Midwest Training Center and training with them, and for about 2 years. And I had 6 MMA fights, amateur MMA fights, right? But I did jujitsu and wrestling and kickboxing, and that was like the main thing. And then my friend Sergio that I worked with, he was a bouncer as well. I found out that he had fought in the Golden Gloves, Chicago Golden Gloves, and he had won the Golden Gloves. And he's like this like skinny Mexican dude, and he's not like swole or anything like that. And so we were talking one day, and he's like, I told him, I says, you fought in the gloves? And he's like, yeah, man. I'm like, no shit. He said, yeah, bro, you should try boxing. So he brought me to the boxing gym. He brought me to his boxing gym in Melrose Park. And so I started training with this guy, Louis Lamelli, who used to be a pro fighter, a really high level pro fighter. And Louis taught me how to box. And then I just had like all these amateur fights. I just started fighting, and I realized, because I wasn't a very good wrestler, my jiu-jitsu has always been above my belt level, I guess. Like I've always been decent in jiu-jitsu, just as a fighter and as an athlete. I've got a pretty. I'm not terrible with jiu-jitsu, you know. I got it really good, but wrestling I was terrible, and so I relied on jiu-jitsu a lot, because if I couldn't get you with my hands, I knew these wrestlers are going to take me down. So then I would work my jiu-jitsu. So I got good at jiu-jitsu, and I tried to get good at wrestling defense, and I was decent with my hands. But when I started going to the boxing gym, I'm like, oh, I'm much better at this. Like I got a much better chance at doing something in boxing than I do with getting to the UFC. Because the dream initially was like, I'm going to go to the UFC. That's what I wanted to do. My friends were going to the UFC. You know, my teammates at that time were going to Bellator or the UFC. And so I'm like, man, I want to do that, but I wasn't good enough. So I had a bunch of amateur fights. I fought in the Golden Gloves a couple years, and then I turned pro. And I went through a couple different trainers, because Louis retired, and then I went to Sam Colonna, he's like the Fortune or Freddie Roach of Chicago. He's his own. He deserves his own thing. He's like boxing royalty in Chicago. You know, he was the coach at the Windy City Boxing Club for years. And so I started training with Sam, and really I turned pro with him, and I developed a style with him. And so I had 13 professional fights all said, and just kind of learned on the job, really. I mean, my promoter, guy named Bobby Hitz, was my boxing promoter. I just did a lot of learning on the job. That's honestly what I did.
How did you take to the whole to actually fighting? I mean, dealing with being hit, and you know the I guess the you know, adversity that comes along with fighting. How did you, what was your mindset? Did it affect you some people don't like getting hit. Some people fold under pressure, you know?
You know what's so crazy? I listened to an interview years ago by this other Jewish boxer that I knew, Zach Woolman, who's dead now. I think he OD'd and died. We weren't friends. I've met him a couple times. I seen him in the gym out here a couple times. He actually was one of the commentators for my last professional boxing match in Studio City. But I listened to like a interview he did, and I remember him saying it was just really, it was like the one time I really just, something really hit me, and I'm like, wow, man, I really agree with that. In a podcast or interview, he said that he would take punishment, and like he didn't mind being hit, because in a way, like he felt like he deserved it. So it was almost, and I'm doing a terrible job of articulating what he said exactly, because I don't remember exactly what he said. But the message that I heard was like, he felt like maybe he deserves to be beat up a little. Maybe he deserves this broken nose, this fractured orbital bone, to get socked up a little bit. So he almost embraces the punishment, and that's the closest to how I can explain it. I didn't mind it, because I guess in a way I felt like I deserved it. Now everybody's got nerves going into a fight. You know, when I'm back in the locker room shadow boxing or hitting mitts with my coach. Got nerves. I've got some nerves going into it. Did I train hard enough? Is my cardio good enough? Am I going to be able to do this? What the fuck am I still doing fighting? Things like that. But then as soon as that bell rings and as soon as the first punch is thrown, it all disappears. And I think most fighters will probably tell you that. It all disappears. All those nerves lead up to walking into that ring, but then as soon as you step up those stairs and you go through the ropes or the cage, as soon as that first punch gets thrown and that contact gets made, all the feelings of fear shut off. And all you feel is just like you're on autopilot and you're just doing the things that you've learned. And the person that has the better skill set, typically, I mean, usually, unless the other guy gets lucky, is gonna have the positive outcome.
When did you become this Sammy? When did you start becoming this guy? I mean, I know you went into Hollywood, you became a stuntman, you're a writer, you were fighting. When did all of that happen for you? And when did you start to make the shift to this guy who is a completely different person than 20 years ago?
When I got sober. So as I said, I used to do a lot of drugs. I used to drink a lot. When I was a kid, that was mainly weed and liquor. As I got older, I started smoking a lot of PCP because that drug was popular where I lived. As I got a little older, I started experimenting with cocaine, but it wasn't bad, and I was okay with it. Then prison happened, and in prison it was just weed and homemade wine. When I got back out, and I tried to make a foray into drug dealing, I learned very quickly that I wasn't a very good drug dealer, and I started getting high. And that's so cocaine led to heroin. Heroin led to speedballs. Speedballs led to eventually smoking crack and shooting heroin. That's how I would speedball. I would smoke some rocks and then shoot some dope. And then when that wasn't good enough, I would just shoot some coke and then shoot some dope. So I was out of my mind. I was literally out of my mind. When I eventually got sober, which was September 17, 2012, which, by the way, I could have been sober a few days before that, but my sponsor at the time picked that day because we knew for sure I was sober on that day. I probably got sober like September 14th or something, but like everything was so hazy back then, I can't tell you. But once I got sober, I went to AA. I'm in AA, and they say it's attraction rather than promotion, so you're not like supposed to promote it. But I don't mind saying it. I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a drug addict. But working the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous with a sponsor is what eventually changed me. I had some spiritual experiences in AA, and I guess the best I can do to explain this with how I am now versus how I was then and what happened is, look, I've made a tremendous amount of changes while I've been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous working a program, right? I'm coming up on 12 years, God willing, September 17th. But I feel as though at some point in like maybe the first 90 days or like 120 days, I feel as though I stepped into a multiverse and I stepped into another version of me in another universe, because I don't identify with the guy that I am today, Chris. I don't even because I don't recognize the guy I used to be. I know that a part of me is in my back pocket. Somewhere. You better believe if I go start taking a couple drinks, smoking a few fucking rocks, I'll be right back to the races. But I feel like I stepped into another Sammy all of a sudden, and I'm like in this world that looks exactly like my world, but I'm making choices to do things that I would never make choices to do, like voluntarily go to AA meetings and show up and speak, or make the coffee at a meeting, or like apologize, or come up with lists of things that I did to other people and make amends to them. Like these are things that like I would never fucking do. Or give the cashier back change, when they uh
Give you too much.
give me too much money.
What was it like for you to actually get clean? Was it super difficult? What was it like detoxing for you? Did you go cold turkey? I mean, what was that like?
I went cold turkey. Thankfully, I wasn't super sick because I didn't have a horrible dope habit at the time, right? So thankfully, I had some pain, but it wasn't horrible. I went a couple days and I was like, okay, I'm all right. I'm gonna go to an AA meeting, and I went to an 8 a.m. meeting, in the suburbs, and the whole thing blows my mind. The whole thing, looking at it now, is like it doesn't even make sense. Like I don't get how it's even possible that it happened. It's so weird to me that this is me now. Like I'm married to a normal, non-alcoholic, brilliant woman who would never, like, listen, I like to think that I was pretty good with girls back in the day, but like I would never get a girl like my wife before. Man. So it's just crazy.
I know a lot of tough guys. I know a lot of strong men, and there is nothing that will bring a man to tears quicker or to his knees quicker than losing their dog, which you just recently lost your dog.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your pup Max and what he meant to you.
Oh man. He was outside of my wife. I think he was the greatest thing that ever happened to me in my life. I have some very weird, strange opinions on things. My dog meant everything to me. I believe that Max was an angel sent from God. When you said that, I believe that. I really believe that, like literally, not figuratively speaking. I believe that he was an angel sent by God. That dog saved my life in more ways than one. And it's been the toughest loss of my life. He was a pit bull. I'll give you like just a quick blurb on how I got him. I mean, when I used to box, I was at a gym that I used to train at on the south side of Chicago on 31st and Western, called Sam Colonna Boxing Club. And I lived on the northwest side of Chicago, but I would drive all the way there every day. It'd take about an hour and train. And I'd train for a few hours and then I'd come back. And basically what happened was I was coming out of the gym and I'm coming downstairs. It was in a factory, and I was coming downstairs and taking the stairs. And as I come out of the stairway, I see this guy, he was a Venezuelan guy, I found out later on, with Max. And he was talking to some other boxer that I knew. And I hear the guy, my friend, going, "Oh, I wish I could. And I walked over there and I asked what was going on with this guy. And he's like, "I need to find this dog a home." I says, "Why?" He goes, "Because I'm moving and they won't let me have the dog." I says, "Why don't you take him to a shelter?" He says, "Well, they'll kill him." And I looked at this dog and I looked at him and he was so beautiful. And I said, "Does he get along with other animals? Because I got this cat." And he goes, "No, he's fine." And I got him. I took him home. And that was, in 2015, I had Max for just about 9 years,
What have been some of the things, the life events that Max has been with you through?
Everything. I mean, I had just started becoming a stuntman around that time. I had like got my SAG card in 2014. So I was very new in stunts. He went through the majority of my professional boxing career. He went through a few girls. he went, you know, my wife, my wife, who was my girlfriend, obviously, and she became my fiance and then my wife. Uh, you know, becoming a professional writer, becoming a playwright, moving to California. He's a South Side dog. That dog was born in the South Side of Chicago, and he retired a couch connoisseur in Rancho Palos Verdes. You know what I mean? Looking at the ocean every day. That's how he retired. So he was with me through every step of the way. And but the one thing that he was with me, the one thing that I'm proud to say is that Max never saw me took a drink because I'm sober, and I was sober his entire life. So I was able to give him a good life. Yeah.
Why do you think men, masculine men, are so affected by these animals?
I don't know. Chris, I never thought I would be. I never thought I, I never expected the relationship to happen in the first place. But I think that for me, I've had a lot of trust issues over my life. I've had some friends that have been loyal. I've had some friends that have been disloyal. I've had some people that have been disloyal. Um, but my dog was never disloyal. My dog had my back. You know, my dog never asked for anything besides love, you know, and he was pure love. And so I don't know what it is, you know, with masculine men. And I've never thought about it, you know, but he was special. He was just special to me, you know. It's just one of those, you know, like in a Bronx Tale when Sonny's telling Calagio about like the three great ones or whatever, and like I feel like he was one of the great ones, you know. He's a dog, but I just it's easy to I shouldn't say easy, but like before you go through it, right? Like you've gone through it and now I've gone through it. But what's crazy is like analyzing now in retrospect, I've seen so many of my friends lose dogs over the years and people I know, and you're always like, oh man, I'm so sorry, or I'm so sorry, you know, and and you're hurting for them, but like in the same time, you're like, thank God I got Max. You know, it's like in your mind, you're like, well, thank God I got my dog. At least I am, right? I'm speaking for myself. I would be truly, you know, empathetic to them, but I couldn't relate to it. So I would just be like, man, thank God Max is here. Shit. But like now it's like, God, now it's like a whole nother level because now it's, you know, now when somebody's dog passes away, now I know like it's the fucking worst. I'm not over it. You know, I'm not. I'm like able to do the podcast, but like I'm not over it. I'm crying. I couldn't watch a fucking Instagram reel this morning while I was drinking my coffee. I started crying. I had to shut it off of my dog. So that's just, you know.
And so, what led you to Hollywood, stunts, writing? How'd you get into that?
Okay, so my boxing promoter Bobby Hits, he's like this big, he's like a big tough guy, you know. He's like big broken nose, probably like 290, 300 pounds, 6'4". He fought George Foreman in the 80s. That was like his big claim to fame, right? Bobby Hits fought Foreman, and
That's a good one.
yeah, or maybe early, I think it was late 80s. Yeah, when in his comeback, Foreman's comeback. So, anyways,
Did he get knocked out? Did Foreman knock him out?
he got brutally knocked out. He got brutally knocked out. Bobby wouldn't mind me telling you. Bobby's a great friend of mine. He got knocked out by Foreman though. By Foreman. It's like if I fought Tyson, what the fuck do you think would happen? You know, it's like
Huge honor to get knocked out by George Foreman.
100%. But Bobby was a good fighter. Bobby was a good fighter, and he had that was his big fight, and then he went into boxing promoting, and so and he's like the foremost boxing promoter in the Midwest, right? So Bobby hits me up and he goes, "Hey, Sammy," he says, "I'm consulting on this TV show." This was 2013. He goes, "I'm consulting on this TV show. Uh, they're doing like some boxing shit and they need a couple guys to go audition." I didn't even, I've told this story a few times. I didn't know what an audition meant. I didn't understand. I had no So what do you mean? He goes, just go to this address and, you know, talk to him. It's for a role in a movie or a TV show. I'm like, all right, thinking I'll get some money. So I go there, and the casting director is like, hey, how are you? I'm like, hey, what's up? Hey, can you make a, you know, can you mean mug? And I'm like, what's up? What the fuck's up? They're like, oh, okay. They're like, can you maybe, there's no dialogue, but can you, you know, maybe talk a little trash? And I'm like, the fuck you want to do, bitch? You know? And she's like, oh, okay. Can you shadow box a little bit? I'm like, yeah. Shadow box, you know. And she said, all right, well, thank you so much for coming. We'll let you know. Afterwards, they call me up. They say, hey, we're gonna go another way. I said, hey, no problem. I leave. I didn't think anything of it. Whatever. And then I get a phone call a little later, and they go, hey, Sammy, hey, are you still available these days? And it was like a 9-day period, right? And I'm like, yeah. They go, okay, we would really like you to come meet this fight coordinator. I didn't know what that meant. And I said, for what? They're like, well, we think that you might be good for some, you know, being this guy's double or something. I go, all right. So I go and meet this guy, and he goes, yeah, man, you look really similar to this guy, same haircut, you know, same size or whatever. So I was the photo double for an actor named Eddie McClintock, who was the top of the show guest star of this TV show called Mind Games with Christian Slater and Steve Zahn. And it was like the greatest like at that time, it was like the greatest week and a couple of days of my life. I was at craft services, eating all types of good food. I was fucking flirting with like the hair and makeup team as they were like doing my tattoos. I was, you know, talking to Steve Zahn and Christian Slater, and you know, and telling them how much I love True Romance, and you know what I mean, like just dumb shit. It was like amazing. And so I did this, and it's crazy because I got screwed over. I should have got my SAG card that day, right? But I didn't. I should have become SAG. I should have got a Taft Hartley contract, which is what you get to get a SAG card, because I did I did all these stunts. Like I did all this shit, but they're thinking, oh, this guy is just some fucking boxer, some street guy. He's not gonna, you know. So they didn't pay me the money that they should have. So I got $250 a day, which to me, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like going to Chipotle, like give me that motherfucking guac. I was pumped, but I didn't realize that I should have been getting so much more because I was doing this guy's stunts. I was hitting the fucking canvas. I was doing all the reactions. I was doing this shit, but they were like, "Oh no, you're the photo double." But I got the bug. This hair and makeup woman, a couple of them actually, they were just like, oh, they loved me, and they were like, you should do stunts. And I said, what do you mean? They go, oh my God, you're athletic, you got a decent look, like you could be a stunt guy, you could get paid for this. I go, really? She's like, yeah, you can make a living for this. And so I went after it. I went after it for like 6 months trying to get a SAG card. I eventually did get my SAG card, and I became a stuntman, and I started working on every show in Chicago. I started working on all the shows and playing characters, and yeah, I mean, like that's what I did. And at that time, that's all I wanted to do. I didn't have. I was still boxing, so I was supplementing my income. You know, I'd make a little money as a stunt guy, and then I didn't even feel like I deserved to call myself a stuntman until I was already doing it for like 4 years. You know, like until I had 10, 15 credits on IMDb, I didn't even think I deserved to be a stunt man at the time. But I was working, and then the money that I needed to make up for rent and for food, I was doing fight. You know, I was taking fights, and so that was my life. That's all I really, you know. My goal at that time was to be the best stunt man I could be, and then when I met my wife, who's an actor, she I read a couple monologues for her, and she's like, "Oh, you're pretty good." So my wife, who's a classically trained actor and pretty brilliant, she started teaching me how to act. So then I started auditioning for roles where they kind of wanted a stunt guy, but they needed an actor too. And I was booking a lot of these roles and saving production money because rather than hiring an actor and doubling him, they were just hiring me and letting me do the shit. And yeah, and I was cleaning up that way. And that's how I got really that's how I started making a name for myself and making a living. And then we moved to LA almost 8 years ago, and I just started working out here all the time. And then around that time, around 8 years ago, I doubled Jon Bernthal on a movie, right? And if I was a little lighter than I am right now with a shaved face, him and me look like we could be brothers, like we could be twins if we're standing next to each other. And I doubled this guy, and I had been wanting to double him for years, and it never happened. I'd been trying to double this fucking guy for so long, and everybody was like, dude, it's not going to happen. He's got his guys, whatever. And then it happened. It happened to me, and I doubled him.
What movie was that for?
Widows, directed by Steve McQueen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it wasn't. Look, I mean, I'm sure the movie had it. Was Liam Neeson was in it. Jon Bernthal was in it. I think well, there was a really good cast in the movie, but I don't think it did huge things, but it was a big movie, and obviously Steve McQueen's a really big director, and yeah, I got along with John really good, and he's like, dude, I want you to be my stunt double, and that I have doubled him over the years, especially when I was still actively doing stunts all the time. I've doubled him quite a few times, but I never became like his main guy. When that happened, I was in the middle of writing a movie, co-writing a movie, a biopic about me, about my life, right? And I I I fast forwarded a little bit because my wife introduced me to my writing partner. She told me, she's like, you should meet. I was trying to write a book, and she's like, have you ever thought about writing a movie? And I said no. She says, well, you should meet this guy I went to college with. He's really, really talented. My wife, she used to be an executive assistant back in the day in LA before she met me. She was doing coverage all the time for producers for scripts, and she's like, listen, I've read a lot of garbage scripts. He's really, really good. I went to school with him. I don't know if you guys would get along because you guys are real different, but you should meet him. So I met him. I came out here to LA and I met him, and we became really good friends, best friends now. And over the course of like a year and a half, 2 years, Adam really taught me how to write, like how to write as a writer, grammatically, structurally. He broke down 3-act structures for movies and 5-act structures for television and half-hour comedies. He showed me how to properly write and gave me the right books to learn. And so once that happened, and I was working with Adam, and we're trying to write this movie, I get this idea, and I call Adam up. It was the night of Conor McGregor versus Floyd Mayweather, and I was on my way to go to the fight, to go to watch the fight. And I think I called my wife, and I go, I got a fucking crazy idea. And she's like, what? I go, what if Jon Bernthal played me and I play a character based on Jon Bernthal, and then I stunt double Jon Bernthal while he's playing me? It's never been done. So my wife's like, that's great. And I'm like, it's never been done. And so I said, let's do it. And she's like, great. How the fuck are you going to get a hold of Bernthal? I go, he fucked up and gave me his phone number. So she's like, oh my God, right? So I hit up Bernthal, And he's like, what the I'm sure he was like, what the fuck? And I go, listen, I know this is gonna sound crazy. I know you've got people coming at you all the time, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I fucking know how this shit is. He says, listen to me. I got a script. I want you to fucking read it. Read 10 pages of this movie. If you don't like it, throw it out, delete my number, block me, never call me again. Forget about me. That's what I told him. I said, but if you fucking like it, let's talk. And I think he was probably tickled, you know what I mean? Like, he was probably like, what the fuck is this nutcase? So he read it and he called me the next week and he said, Sammy, I fucking love this script. He goes, it needs a little polish. He goes, I want to be a part of this. He goes, I want to do this. Now, obviously, you can look online. There's no movie that he's played me. So that movie never happened. What happened was Jon taking an interest in that movie. All of a sudden, we're getting brought into WME. We're taking meetings with agents. Everybody's excited. We got the script optioned by a production company, and so it almost happened. But that's what gave us, that gave us a boost. It gave Adam and I a boost because we were trying so hard. And Bernthal, his window ended up. I mean, listen, I still talk to him about doing the movie, but his window closed, and then what? The producer that we had was trying to get Shia LaBeouf to do it. Shia passed on the script without reading it. Just said he didn't want to do another boxing movie. So that happened. And then, just like I was like, fuck it. Well, now we're writing. So we started writing more and more and more and more and more. And eventually, just through a lot of unorthodox means, I met the right people. I wrote a play. I wrote this play by myself that got produced in LA and it did really good. And a woman came to my play who used to be a senior agent at CAA. And she's like, you wrote this? I'm like, yeah. She's like, this is really good. Have you ever heard of a guy named Gary Lennon? I'm like, no. She's like, you should know who he is. I'm going to set up a meeting. So she set up a meeting with me and this guy who's a monster showrunner, incredible guy. I meet Gary for coffee in Los Feliz. He's like, hey, I read your play. You're really good. I says, listen, that's not shit. You should read the stuff me and my partner have written. It's way better. He goes, oh, you want to write for television? I go, yeah, we want to write for television. He goes, if you could write for anything, what would you want to write for? I go, whatever the fuck you're doing, just hire me. I need a job. Let's do it. And he started laughing. He's like, all right, well, that's a good answer. Well, 2 years go by. I'm still stunning. I'm still doing stunts. And 2 years go by. I see that they do Power in Chicago, Power Force in Chicago. Now, I'm a fan of the show. I'm a fucking legit fan of Power. And I'm like, man, I would love to write on that show. But now I see they're doing a Chicago fucking version of the show. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. So what I end up doing is I call the stunt coordinator in Chicago because I know everybody. They're all my friends. And I says, hey, listen, I'd love to be a part of the show, but now I got a method to my madness. So the guy's like, yeah, I think I can get you in as like stunt Albanian #2 or something. I'm like, yeah, great. So I go out there, right? I'm on the set. The showrunner, who's this guy named Robert Munich, who I'm friends with now. I'm friends with Munich now. He's the showrunner of this of season 1. I go up to him. I'm like, yo, bro, I should be writing on this fucking show. This is the showrunner. He's looking at me like, who is this crazy guy? I says, listen, buddy. You're right, exactly. But I go, listen, pal. I said, I don't even live here anymore. I live in LA. I came out here just to fucking talk to you. I took this job just so I could talk to you. And he's like, what? I'm like, look, man, here's the deal. And I told him, I said, I just want to talk to you and the star of the show because I should be writing for this. And he's like, whoa. And I start dropping names because I'm friends with all these guys out here now that I know that I've had meetings with by this time. And I've met Joe Sikora's brother, Albin, and we've become friends. He's the star of the show, and I've become friends with Albin. So he's like, I start telling him, look, I know this person, this person, this person. So now he's looking at me like, this is crazy. So he's like, you got representation? I'm like, yeah. We gave him, we had a manager at the time. I gave him the name. So then I walk over to Joe after we do our scene and I get killed and everything like that. We're about to break for lunch. I says, hey, Joe, I says, I know your brother. He goes, who are you? I'm like, listen, buddy. I tell him, I should be writing on this motherfucker. He's like, oh shit, my bro told me about you. You're that stunt guy that writes, right? I read your stuff. You're really good. I said, Joe, what the fuck, baby? I said, bring me on the team. I said, I should be doing, this is my real life. I live this shit. There's nothing about gangs and drugs and violence in Chicago that I don't know. Like, let me help you out. So, anyways, that job happened. My boss at the time was like apoplectic with rage, looking at me like, what the fuck are you doing? But as I said, I had a whole method to this and a reason with my craziness. And a couple months go by and I see that Munich left Power to go do something else. And I'm like, that's crazy. I wonder who is going to pick up the show. Now, I was on this other show, the 4400, stunt doubling an actor. And I get a phone call. I see Gary Lennon pop up on my phone. And he's like, hey, Sammy, I don't know if you heard the news. I took over Power. I'm like, no, I haven't heard the news. He goes, yeah. He goes, listen, I want you and Adam to send me your best Chicago sample right now. He's like, you probably won't hear anything for 3 to 4 weeks, but I'm going to try to get you on the team. He's like, it's going to be an uphill. He goes, look, it's going to be an uphill battle, but I'm going to try. And I'm like, all right. So I sent him a script that we had. And the next day we got a job. The next day we got offered the job. And that changed everything because then we got the agents and, and then we started getting more meetings and then we sold a movie to a studio. And so, that's how it's all happened.
That is a masterclass in networking, bro. It really is who you know and who you're talking to and who you can get around. I mean,
it's the crazy thing is that like, yeah, true. But also this is the only way I know how to do it. Like, I don't know any other way. I didn't go to school. I have a GED. I've taken a couple college classes now, right? Like I've done some like advanced classes and things like that now, but like, I don't have a formal education. I've learned everything on the job. And I've been around. The thing is that I'm hard to bullshit too, because I've been around the best bullshit artists in the fucking world, like the worst people in the world and some of the best people, but also like, I just know how to navigate bullshit. It's just something that's like easy. So like Hollywood is like, all right, yeah, it's fucking tough. Sure, it's tough. There's a lot of scumbags. There's also a lot of really good people. And you just got to find the good people. And you got to not be afraid, and you got to be willing to go. You got to be willing to go for it. You really do. You got to be willing to go for it. You just, there's so many talented people out there. People that are more talented than me. But they'll never go for it. You know what I mean? And it's crazy.